OBS hates me. Hello, everybody. This is Dark Conservatarian, and back with another live stream, second live stream in one day, only because of the fact that a little bit earlier I'd started a live stream via OBS, and my computer completely shut down on me or restarted by itself. God, this is so frustrating. It's the second time of today as well. Like before, I had ever at all gone live at all. It had done that to me once before already. Like right after I had done a little test stream, it decided to do that. And then it decided to do it a second time today. That second time being while I was in the middle of the earlier live stream that y'all might have seen, or maybe a few of you, but anyway, yeah, that's what happened to that stream. It got completely kaput because my computer completely went restart on itself. And if it happens a third time right now during this live stream, I'm just going to completely give up for today because this is getting ridiculous. But either way, I'm going to have to take a look into the little error, the problem that I have with it. There's like a little error code that I'm provided, and it's restarting when it says it's collecting data to see what the problem is and whatnot. So I'm going to have to solve that in order to get OBS properly working again, because I did not do that stream starting soon footage for nothing, folks. I really want to do that. I want to do that. Like have a stream starting soon footage with some snappy, edited together Overwatch gameplay and some awesome music playing in the background as well. I think that would do well for the channel, very well. But anyway, yeah, so for any of y'all who might be getting tired of my bitching, right now I'll get into the substance. So I've been meaning to talk about this subject for a while now, actually. A claim that I have been making for a few years now, actually, is that Obama, in spite of the fact that the fracking boom happened under his administration, it happened in spite of him, and I had made the claim. And on top of that, I had also made the claim that if it was completely left up to him, if he had completely his way, that he would have heavily restricted or even banned fracking. When really, shoot, I meant to do this earlier. When really, it's more complicated than that. That's why I have the Tim Pool beanie, as it has been dubbed as, on right now. Because that apparently is a favorite saying of Tim Pool, is it's complicated. And hold on a second. I just realized that I put my Monster in water all the way over there. Sorry about the lack of professionalism, but yeah, that was only about a second. But anyway, so as you can see, I have a few articles pre-read right here, and I will be providing these in the description box below once I go off air, because for right now, I did not really have the time to be able to set things up fully. But as this Forbes magazine article goes, President Obama's support for America's shale oil and natural gas. And as you all know, Forbes, I fairly rely on for economic information. They are fairly down the middle, have kind of non-biased or unbiased, non-partisan. They have opinions from both sides of the aisle as far as political opinions go. And this one is kind of a little bit of a mix of both, because on the kind of leftward view of things, the country did well under Obama or because of Obama or whatever. And the right-wing view of this article is that the right-wing opinion anyways, that this article goes espousing basically, is that if fracking was to be banned, which might be a bit of a no shit Sherlock kind of statement, but nonetheless, that fracking, if it were banned, it would really hurt the economy here in this nation, as it goes later on showing that gas prices would rise up, the tax revenue would go down, unemployment would go up, and all that other good stuff. If you want to know the details, like I said, go check out the article for yourself. I will provide it after I'm off air. But this article is a little bit too generous towards Obama, as I have read it. As they go almost making it out like it's because of Obama. And really, that isn't exactly a matter of fact. I mean, next article that I had lined up for today is from factcheck.org. Now, y'all know that I do not like PolitiFact, but this is factcheck.org, not PolitiFact. So I do not know how much an association that factcheck.org is in with PolitiFact. But even if factcheck.org is a fairly leftward article posting site, is a fairly leftward media outlet, it still goes putting out a little bit of talking points that kind of goes against the grain as far as left-wing narratives go. So I think we can at least somewhat rely on what is being told in this article right here. Basically, they go saying that it wasn't really because of Obama, and it was because of the free market, because of the energy companies that done investments and research into fracking in order to get that industry up and going. There weren't really any restrictions beforehand against fracking because fracking was still a fairly new thing. Excuse me, not a whole lot of restrictions were in the first place on fracking. So therefore, and it was an industry that I guess that Obama was unable to touch to begin with. So yeah. Yeah, I'm all over the place. I just hit a bit of a roadblock in my mind right there. But basically, the thing that I wanted to fact check myself on is that Obama, he doesn't want to ban, or he did not want to ban fracking, or at least not explicitly anyways. There's not any explicit statements from him or real hard implications that he absolutely wanted to ban fracking in the same way that Bernie Sanders is so passionate about, or even Cortez for that matter, or even how Biden has kind of flip-flopped on that issue throughout the campaign trail of this last presidential election. But according to fact check here, going back to this article right here, according to factcheck.org, oh God, I'm losing my train of thought here. They go saying the obvious that fracking went up under Obama, but saying that it wasn't really because of Obama, it was because of the free market. And it goes even showing some things that, in spite of what Obama had signed to kind of free up the energy sector in some certain facets, it was still theoretically, anyways, because of it was still likely because of some pressures from the Republicans when they had both control of the House for most of Obama's tenure, and then definitely the Senate in the last 2 years of Obama's administration, of Obama's term in office. Yeah. Sorry that I'm a little bit out of the funk right now, folks, but I just, like I said, the technical difficulties of the last stream that I tried to host, and it was such a good stream going so far, and yet I had to private it because it just gone ultimately failing. But anyway, to get on with the subject, like I said, it's complicated, Obama's exact positions. Now, and then there was this Hill article that I had also pre-read talking about how that, okay, sorry, gathering up my train of thought here again. But fact check also, on the other hand, says only because of, that's not only in spite of Obama that the fracking energy went up, but also in spite of Trump. That it's not really because of any real efforts from Trump as to how that fracking went up. Although there is a little bit of a disputation on that, as according to the Hill here, as it goes rightly explaining, court OKs Trump repeal of Obama public lands fracking rule. So there is a little bit of something that Trump did for the fracking industry in that he lifted some regulation in regards of an Obama era regulation on fracking. Now, like I said, there is no explicit statement from Obama, as I'm correcting myself on that. There's no explicit statement or hard implication from Obama that he did ultimately want to ban fracking or put a huge restriction on it. But because of this kind of marginal restriction that he did end up putting on fracking, one could almost come up with the theory that maybe he had some intentions that he wasn't fully honest and outward about. of what he would have done about fracking. So, again, that was just a quick little fact check on a claim that I had been claiming for years. Oh, and also cap and trade. Cap and trade. Does everybody remember that? Cap and trade was a thing that Obama had ultimately passed in the early part of his administration, of his years in office. That would be also another sign that possibly Obama would have done more against fracking if he ultimately was able to get his way. But because of the fact that hardly anybody on the right trusts him, I wouldn't blame anyone. And I would almost have the suspicion in my mind, too, that in spite of there not being any explicit explicit words from him saying that he wants to restrict or ban fracking, that he probably would have been a little bit more outward if he ended up having like a little bit more of the government on his side throughout the rest of his 6 years in office after he had lost the House. But it is what it is. So enough of my rambling on me fact checking myself, and these websites are refreshing themselves because, like I said, I had all these articles pulled up earlier. All these articles pulled up while I was in the middle of live streaming the last OBS stream that my computer ended up restarting on. But anyway, so moving on from that, though, this is from Washington Examiner. I have not pre-read these articles. This is just some little ditties that I had saved up on my notepad or my WordPad for a while now on articles that I want to eventually read, but did not quite have the time to because it was election season and I had to retain more of my time covering the election more appropriately anyways. But this is a little bit more of an aftermath sort of scenario right here. This was posted November 10th. Washington Examiner saying what? Conservative justices appear skeptical of GOP case for throwing out Obamacare in Supreme Court. The coalition of GOP-led states arguing to throw out all of Obamacare in the majority conservative Supreme Court struggled Tuesday to make the case in oral arguments that the law could not stand without the now defunct tax penalty for refusing to buy health insurance. Conservatives on the court were skeptical, suggesting that the law will withstand the latest challenge in the court. Chief Justice John Roberts told Texas Solicitor General Kyle Hawkins that Congress could have invalidated the whole law in 2017, along with the defunct mandate, if they deemed it necessary to maintain the law's constitutionality, but it did not. Yeah, I still freshly remember those days. The Freedom Caucus going up against the Trumpist Republicans and the establishment Republicans in regards of health care. All the Trumpists and establishmentarians were all like, repeal and replace, and then the Freedom Caucus were all like, no replace, just repeal. They could not come to an agreement, and so therefore hardly anything anyways, got done on Obama. Aside from the individual mandate, aside from the individual mandate being repealed, hardly anything got done. I think it's hard for you to argue that Congress intended the entire act to fall if the mandate was struck down when the same Congress that lowered the penalty to zero did not even try to repeal the rest of the act, Roberts said. He added that Republicans in Congress might have intended for the court to strike down the entire law, but that's not our job. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, meanwhile, sided with Donald Verrilli, former Solicitor General under President Barack Obama, saying that I tend to agree with you that this is a very straightforward case for severability, and that under court precedent, we would excise the mandate and leave the rest of the act in place. Democrats have argued that invalidating Obamacare would take health insurance away from more than 20 million people, a specter that hung over Senate hearings to confirm President Trump's latest Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. Tuesday's arguments were the first for Barrett since her confirmation last month. When GOP members of Congress failed to repeal and replace the law as they had promised in 2017, oh God, not all the GOP had promised that, by the way, just to clarify that. So I don't know exactly how much I approve of this article specifically from Washington Examiner. And Washington Examiner, I hold true the opinion that they are a fairly unbiased site. Nonetheless, they reduced the penalty to zero for not complying with the individual mandate, which was considered to be the linchpin of the law. But because the penalty for not complying with the mandate is now zero, liberal justices argued that the states challenging the law are not harmed and lack standing to bring the lawsuit. Indeed, Roberts questioned whether the court should allow somebody not injured by a provision to roam around through those thousands of pages of the written law and pick out whichever ones they want to challenge. Okay, so maybe the court battle is not there. Maybe there's no precedent for going against Obamacare in court, but they should still fight it in Congress at least. Roberts, who was appointed by former President George W. Bush in 2005, was the swing vote to uphold Obamacare in a separate case in 2012, and he has since criticized the plaintiff's argument that the law cannot stand without the now repealed mandate. The plaintiff's argument that the law cannot stand without the now repealed mandate. He cited the same precedent for severability in a ruling decided in June concerning the Dodd-Frank financial reform law, saying that the court has ruled in the past that such provisions was severable because the remaining provisions in an act were capable of functioning independently. The court adjourned a little afternoon, and the case is expected to be decided in June 2021. End of that article. So, yeah, moving on to the next one. I just thought that was a little bit of interesting information that I quickly read on Strikeforce. But nonetheless, here is something even more juicier. This is shared. This has been shared in one of my Discord servers. I cannot remember exactly who shared it, but whoever you are, thanks a lot for sharing this. As this is from a website called mybroadband.co.za. So I never heard of this article or this particular website before, but now it's a first. And the title goes, South Africa has run out of taxpayers. Now, we might have y'all might have roughly heard about the stories about how South Africa had been oppressing a lot of their farmers and whatnot. I mean, there's of course a bit of a race narrative going on with the farmer suppression and whatnot, but I'm not going to tap into that so much. I mean, I used to listen to Starboard Disagrees a whole lot, if y'all have heard of that YouTube channel. And in fact, it's been a while since I got any notifications or anything about the YouTube channel. But whenever he tried to explain the whole South Africa farmer situation subject, it kind of, generally speaking, went a little bit over my head. But nonetheless, maybe this article will go in a little bit more plain detail as to what exactly South Africa has done. But whatever South Africa has done, just ultimately, apparently, has lost them a whole bunch of taxpayers, as according to this article. So let's get on with it. South Africa has run out of taxpayers and capital, which is why the government is now eyeing savings to get more money. This is the view of Dawie Root, the founder, director, and chief economist of the Efficient Group. It is well known that approximately 3 million South Africans account for 97% of the country's personal income tax. 3 million South Africans. 97%. That's a lot. I mean, even the top 1% of our country right here, which would add up to 3 million, don't add up to quite 97% of the personal income tax. I think the top 1%, if I remember correctly, well, at least this is last I heard anyways. Last I heard, they contribute 40% of the income taxes into this country. Whereas the middle class, they contribute about almost all of the remaining 60%. And then the lower class barely contribute like 5%, something like that. But here, you have 3 million, which I do not know exactly what percentage of the population that 3 million is in Africa and South Africa, but nonetheless, 3 million contributing 97%. That's a huge, whopping percentage of the tax revenue in South Africa. The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. I wonder when we'll see the 1 million South African dollar, says JC Armitage. Oh boy. South Africa becomes the next Venezuela, y'all. Of course, I do not know the exact details of South Africa's economy and what industries they nationalize as compared to Venezuela nationalizing their oil industry and whatnot. What is of concern is that this tax base is shrinking. Over the past 5 years, the number of taxpayers in South Africa declined significantly. What has happened in South Africa is that we have run out of taxpayers, which means we have basically run out of capital, said Root. This leaves the country in a financial predicament, which is why the government is now eyeing the savings of South Africans. The route to get their hands on pension funds, Root explained, is for the government to implement a policy on prescribed assets. A prescribed assets policy will give politicians control of pension funds and where this money is invested. This concept is not new. The ANC's 2019 election manifesto proposed the introduction of prescribed assets on financial institutions funds to unlock resources for investments in social and economic development. Not exactly explaining as to what was the problem in the first place, what caused them to lose those taxpayers. It's just explaining the savings that they're about to tap into, which is, not going to lie, kind of running a little bit over my head, folks. But continuing on, this will likely prompt many people to leave the country or take their money offshore, which is why Root expects stricter forex controls. The Treasury has already confirmed plans to change rules around financial immigration and the ability to withdraw one's retirement funds. Yeah, and that last description, that last paragraph, they already was losing taxpayers, and they're planning to tap into people's savings, and that's just going to make them lose taxpayers even more. Good job, South Africa. Good job. Sarcasm, of course, folks. One of these plans is to have a 3-year lock-in period for withdrawing retirement funds, which restricts a rapid flight of capital. The only thing left after the government has depleted resources from pension funds is inflation, Root said. When the money from taxpayers and savers either is not enough any longer, the only option which remains is to inflate yourself out of debt. We can already see from the yield curve that the market is telling us we can expect inflation going forward, said Root. What South Africans should do. With this scenario now playing itself out in South Africa, many people are asking what they should do. Root advised people to stay abreast of the latest financial and economic news to help them to make informed decisions. They should also assess individual risks and ensure they can manage these risks. For people who are staying in South Africa, Root said there are 4 things they should focus on. Become successful. Why would they? I mean, it seems almost like they're getting taxed the crap out of them. Become successful, be profitable, Put yourself first as an individual, pay as little tax as possible without breaking any laws. This is simple, high level, he said. And that's the end of the article. Not quite an explanation as to why that they had run out of those taxpayers in the first place, but I can only imagine that it's probably because of the South African farmer situation, in which there's not only the racial aspect that people like to consistently pull out as far as South African farmers go, but apparently there's also the financial side of this issue. JC Armitage says, I hear Greece is also running out of tax cattle as well. All right. I was referring to the 1 million Zimbabwe dollar, by the way. Okay. So moving on from that subject, and we're going to move on to a subject that strikes a little bit closer to home. I think this might have been shared by Nate the Voluntarist or someone else in Nate's Discord server. I'm not exactly certain, but this is according to FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. NPR saying, mounting evidence suggests COVID not as deadly as thought. Did the experts fail again? All right, so this is this is very interesting. This is from June 12th of 2020, but since that people seem to be cracking down on the lockdowns and starting to fearmonger coronavirus again, it seems that in spite of this being a fairly old article, it's still a damn well relevant one. Better late than never, says Zachary Colley. Yeah, indeed. And you just came in time for probably what is going to be the juiciest subject of the entire stream. The experts may have subjected us to a blunder greater than any since the Iraq War. In April 2005, Charles Diolfer, the CIA's top weapons inspector in Iraq, admitted in the CIA's final report that after an extensive search, no weapons of mass destruction could be found. After more than 18, you know what? I'm going to be honest, folks. I have a little bit of a disputation on the claim of there being no WMDs in Iraq. From an interview that I had listened to years ago, talking about supposedly that there was a uranium enrichment facility found in Iraq years after years after Bush was no longer president. And apparently they had found this out back in 2006, but they sat on this information and did not reveal it because they thought that it was going to lose them too much political capital to come out, and they would lose the midterms of 2006, even though that they anyway lost the midterms in 2006. But nonetheless, it's a subject I'm going to have to just put aside for another time. But anyway, just given the benefit of the doubt, though, that no WMDs were found at all in Iraq, let's just continue on. After an extensive search, after more than 18 months, the WMD investigation and debriefing of the WMD-related detainees has been exhausted, wrote Diolfer, the leader of the Iraq Survey Group. As matters now stand, the WMD investigation has gone as far as feasible. Today, it's generally accepted that the presence of WMD was the primary basis for the Iraq War. Naturally, the absence of such weapons shook the world. The media blamed the politicians. The politicians blamed U.S. intel, and the intelligence actors involved mostly defended their work. The official word, chronicled in the Rob Silverman report, concluded that the intelligence community didn't adequately explain just how little good intelligence it had, or how much its assessments were driven by assumptions and inferences rather than concrete evidence. The Iraq War WMD debacle is arguably the greatest expert fail. They're putting it in quotes, by the way, the word fail, but I don't know why they put it in quotations, but nonetheless, in generations. The holy triumvirate, lawmakers, bureaucrats, and media all failed to sniff out the truth. If any of them had, a war that cost trillions of dollars and claimed the lives of 1 to 200,000 people likely could have been avoided. It would be difficult to surpass the Iraq blunder, but emerging evidence on COVID-19 suggests the experts, again, lawmakers, bureaucrats, and media, may have subjected us to a blunder of equally disastrous proportions. Zachary Colley also says in the chat right now, all this because some jerkwads were not transparent. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, this live stream is apparently not going as good as the last one, mostly because it's not as high quality. And what really disappoints me is that I had such a buttery smooth connection, strong connection on OBS 2. And the footage that I had opening up and playing for the beginning of the stream, it was going smoothly as well. All the snappy edits and whatnot, the music and all that stuff. It was just so on point. And the opening of reading the first chat comment that was there, that was from Sent11000. Reading Mad World by Gary Jules, or whoever the guy's name was again. It was just a bit of a funny opening. And yet that is all wasted because my computer decided to restart on itself. Again, enough of my pitching. Anyway, a new NPR report suggests the global response to COVID-19 may have been reached on a flawed premise. Mounting evidence suggests the coronavirus is more common and less deadly than it first appeared. The evidence comes from tests that detect antibodies to the coronavirus in a person's blood rather than the virus itself. The The evidence comes from tests that detect antibodies to the coronavirus in a person's blood rather than the virus itself. So basically, who knows? Most of the country might have already had coronavirus, or even currently have coronavirus for that matter, throughout this year. And yet, if that's true, if most of to all of us already caught coronavirus, and that would mean that the death rate looks even more disparate than what I had read on presented to you guys in the last episode of Strike Force. That would mean that the death to case rate is even more disparate from each other. And that would mean ultimately that coronavirus is not as big a deal as it should be made out to be. The tests are finding large numbers of people in the US who were infected but never became seriously ill. Exactly. And I don't want to hear any more about this whole asymptomatic carriers bullshit if this is the case. And when these mild infections are included in coronavirus statistics, the virus appears less dangerous. Yeah, exactly. The current best estimates for the infection fatality risk are between 0.5 and 1%, says Caitlin Rivers, an epidemiologist at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. 0.5 and 1%, even less than 2%. I always consistently read 2% as the case fatality rate, y'all. But this is like half or maybe even less than half of that small number. Holy crap, folks. We are hurting ourselves over this? Over this? Really? That's in contrast with death rates of 5% or more based on calculations that included only people who got sick enough to be diagnosed with tests that detect the presence of virus in a person's body. Okay, let me reread that again. That's in contrast with death rates of 5% or more based on calculations that included only people who got sick enough to be diagnosed with tests that detect the presence of virus in a person's body. Okay. So from what I'm understanding from that paragraph right there, basically it's only including the people who were like presently sick, who were like outwardly and consistently showing symptoms of coronavirus. Among that portion, the death rate was 5%, but taking into account absolutely everybody who has been tested for coronavirus, even the people who weren't outwardly sick, the death rate would mean that it goes even downward more from 5% all the way down to probably 0.5%. Read up on the chat a little bit more. Zachary Colley says, Dr. Fauci's drones. More cases. Forget the death rate. Focus on more cases. Exactly. You know what? I'm just going to... This is really lifting up my spirits as far as the cases go. I can't believe... Actually, I can believe. I can believe that I was almost falling for the fear, like, what is it now? That almost 8 months ago, I was almost falling for the fear of this disease. And yet now, I'm becoming more and more optimistic of the disease itself. So optimistic to where that I think other people, particularly the government and whether they're acting upon this virus, is too pessimistic, too authoritarian, and all that shit. Yeah, JC Armitage, only talk about who had it. Never talk about the many who recover from it. Got to keep the peasants in fear somehow. Exactly. Circuit Colley says, I hope you're happy, Foamy/Jim. This is what your fear-mongering brought us. Tell it like it is, DarkCon. Exactly. If Mr. Mathers Foamy takes responsibility for all the harm done by the lockdown, I'll be shocked. I wonder what Foamy the Squirrel's most recent commentary on coronavirus is, actually. JC Armitage says, I caught on to the BS the moment the lockdown started to happen. Honestly, I did not, JC. In fact, there were times that I was almost tempted to at least momentarily, shelve my libertarian principles. But the more and more that people become, the more and more authoritarian people became, and the more that normies became dismissive of the liberty infringing side of this, the more red pilled I became on this. Ironically enough, I became more and more red pilled the more and more that people got pessimistic over the disease. Or the more and more authoritarian and more dismissive people got, the more and more red pilled I got. Ironically enough. Many people will recall the fatality. Like, this makes me reflect back and look back. During that video that I made in response to Foamy the Squirrel, like I said, I was somewhat empathetic towards all the pro-lockdown people. I was frustrated that people were being dismissive of the fact that people are infringing on liberties in order to combat the virus. I was all like, whether or not it's good or bad, whether or not the lockdowns are good or bad, it doesn't matter on whether or not it can be defined as freedom infringing. It still is freedom infringing, you freaking normie. Like I said, I was still empathetic towards the lockdowns and other policies that people had. I was advocating even maybe people should stay at home. But now I'm even more awakened than I was back then, responding to Foamy the Squirrel. This is frustrating. If only I had this bit of information to include in that response video. Anyway, many people will recall the fatality risk debate that took place prior to and in the early stages of the lockdowns. Exactly, I do recall. There was much discussion over how deadly the virus was and what the collective response to the virus should be. Some voices exercised caution. The public is behaving as if this epidemic is the next Spanish flu. You know what? Even though that I was somewhat sympathetic to the pro-lockdown people, I never at any point thought that the coronavirus was as deadly as the Spanish flu. Like, I had listened to a documentary about the Spanish flu, and basically there were like lumps forming in people's rib cages because their lungs would become so damaged that air would leak and therefore form those lumps in their rib cages. That was how deadly and damaging that it was explained as to how the Spanish flu was. People be coughing blood, people becoming purple and other unnatural colors for a human, people like damaging and rupturing their abdominal muscles because they'd be coughing so hard and all that stuff. It was crazy. And I had never, ever heard of anything like that, any symptoms like that came out of COVID-19. I never heard of anything that happened like that in relation to COVID-19. So I never heard, I never thought it was as bad as the Spanish flu. Anyway, which is frankly understandable given, no, I kind of have to disagree. It's not really understandable. Like I said, not even heard a single anecdote of how COVID-19 made like rupturing lungs or people go purple or, it's damaged their abdominal muscles or anything like that. So no, it's not understandable to me. But anyway, I digress. Which is understandable given that initial reports have staked COVID-19 mortality at about 2 to 3%, quite similar to the 1918 pandemic that killed tens of millions of people. Jeremy Samuel Faust, an emergency medicine physician and an instructor at Harvard Medical School, wrote in Slate, "Allow me to be the bearer of good news. These frightening numbers are unlikely to hold." How long have I been going? Only about 39 minutes. Oh, hello there, Myth Cuttlefish in the chat. She says it could give you encephalitis, if I'm pronouncing that right, though. But it's rare. Okay. Yes, AC/DC. This is actually my work shirt. I haven't even showered yet, folks. As soon as I got back home, I'd starting to set up for the live stream, and yet it still became halfway fruitless. I wasn't able to do an OBS formatted stream. Anyway. Similarly, on March 5th, vaccine expert Paul A. Offit, who holds the Maurice R. Hillman Chair of Vaccinology at the University of Pennsylvania, told factcheck.org that he believed that the World Health Organization's 3.4% fatality rate figure was too high, suggesting it was well below 1%. Ah, interesting. March 5th. March 5th. This is the first time that I'm hearing this bit of fucking information. The media is not doing its due diligence. No media is really doing their due diligence. And by the way, I'm not exactly an expert reporter. I mean, I try to keep an open eye out for pertinent and damning information like this, and that the fatality rate could be a whole lot lower than 5%, could be a whole lot lower than 3.4%, could be a whole lot lower than 2%. But I never, at any point in the early days of the coronavirus, came across a piece of information like this, that it could be lower than even 2%. But the bit of information that could be lower than even 2%, that could be as low, even below 1%, dates all the way back to March 5th. This is frustrating, folks. This is frustrating. Yeah, nobody, not even mainstream media, not alternative media, not even any news websites that I normally go to. None of them have been doing their due diligence on this front. I have not come across the information until this Feet article. Well, then again, this is from June 12th, so they tried their best. So they're a whole lot earlier than I am in getting to this information, but here we are. Anyway, we're more the victim of fear than the virus, Offit said, adding that the world was witnessing a wild overreaction to the disease. I can't even remember how early that I came across this specific article right here, but maybe I should have set aside some time for Strike Force to get to this article a whole lot sooner than I am right now. So in that case, I'm probably not doing my due diligence at the same time. But nonetheless, not until 3 months after the fact, this piece of information getting out there. That could be well below 1%, the fatality rate. Damn. Voices like those of Faust and Offit were quickly drowned out, however. The 24-hour news cycle fanned collective fear and outrage that more was not being done. Runs on toilet paper and masks ensued. Neil Ferguson, professor of mathematical biology at Imperial College London, predicted millions would die in the best case scenario, quote unquote. Yeah. The predictive models that never came true, y'all. Following the example of China, one of the most authoritarian regimes in the world, most of the developed world was placed in indefinite lockdown by their own governments. The social and economic costs of the lockdown soon became apparent. The U.S. alone has seen 40 million jobs lost, many of which aren't coming back. Recession looms. Hundreds of thousands of businesses have already been wiped away. The federal debt has surged to $26 trillion. Unfortunately, the COVID disaster and the aforementioned Iraq war fit a familiar pattern. As the historian Paul Johnson has observed, most of the worst events of the 20th century were perpetrated by experts who used collective power to shape world events in a direction they believed was beneficial. Okay, curiosity. How much longer does this article go? Not too much longer. Probably about a little over halfway done. Zachary Colley says, Eric July has been doing a good job of keeping up. All right. Here we are. Where are those millions, sir? Exactly. Not millions, but only a little over 200,000. And that's given the benefit of the doubt to the CDC that they are getting their reporting correct in how many deaths are from COVID-19. One of the principal lessons of our tragic century, which has seen so many millions of innocent lives sacrificed in schemes to improve the lot of humanity, is beware intellectuals. Johnson wrote in The Intellectuals, not merely should they be kept away from the levers of power, they should also be objects of particular suspicion when they seek to offer collective advice. Nobody denies the immense costs of the lockdowns, but what was gained by them remains a subject of contention. A May report from J.P. Morgan, as well as other evidence, suggests the lockdowns had little to no impact on the spread of COVID-19. Marko Kolanovic, a physicist and strategist for J.P. Morgan, reread that. Marko Kolanovic, a physicist and strategist for J.P. Morgan, pointed out that a majority of nations saw declines in infection rates after the lockdowns were lifted. Unlike rigorous testing of new drugs, lockdowns were administered with little consideration that they might. Unlike rigorous testing of new drugs, lockdowns were administered with little consideration that they might not only cause economic devastation, but potentially more deaths than COVID-19 itself. Exactly, Kolanovic said. Yeah. I still remember reading that one article talking about how that millions of children could die or even have already died because of being forced to stay home, because of economic damages done to individual families. God. Most nations saw COVID infection rates go down after lockdowns were lifted, a recent J.P. Morgan analysis found. Figure 2, the vast majority of countries had decreased COVID-19 infection rates after national lockdowns were lifted. Daily infection rate post-lockdown. Increased infection rate after lockdown end. Decreased infection rate after lockdown end. Okay. Similarly, a Bloomberg analysis in May found little correlation between the severity of a nation's restrictions and whether it managed to curb excess fatalities. Meanwhile, Norway's top health official recently stated that lockdowns were not a necessary step to tame the virus. On the other hand, the Washington Post, and we all know how untrustworthy the Washington Post is, but even Washington Post, as Fee is citing, this week cited studies claiming the lockdown orders prevented hundreds of millions of COVID-19 infections and saved millions of lives. Okay. So they're just citing the Washington Post. Fee is just citing the Washington Post as a foil, it seems, not really relying on them as a source. These findings come with caveats, however. First, one of the studies was submitted on March 22nd, well before the vast majority of COVID cases had even occurred. Because our testing was so flawed, and wasn't as vast as it is now. The other study was conducted by researchers at the Imperial College of London, the same school from which Ferguson hailed. He has since resigned after it was discovered that he broke the lockdown protocol he helped design by allowing his married lover to come to his home. Holy shit. You called for a lockdown protocol that would prevent loved ones from uniting with each other? Are you fucking serious? I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my hesitance in my word right there, but that was so mind-bogglingly insane that I found it hard to utter the words in response to that. Holy crap. Ferguson, who in 2005 said up to 200 million people might die from bird flu, about 100 did, was asked by the New York Times in March what the best case scenario was for the U.S. during the COVID pandemic. Wow. Neil Ferguson, why is this guy still in the job? If he made a prediction that 200 million would die of bird flu when only about 100 did. About 1.1 million deaths, said he responded, Ferguson did. As of June 10, Ferguson is off by about a factor of 10. Why we should continue to listen to schools that have already proven to be so disastrously wrong in anyone's guess. The Chicken Little story comes to mind. In 2003, state actors led the world into a bloody, years-long struggle in Iraq to protect the world from nuclear weapons that didn't exist, only to eventually learn how little U.S. intel experts actually knew about Iraq's nuclear capabilities. In 2020, central planners from around the world decided to shut down the global economy to protect people from an invisible, highly contagious virus that will result in no or mild symptoms for up to 90% of its carriers. Some lessons, it seems, are hard to learn. End of article. I'm blown away, folks. I'm blown away. That was a damn good article. In fact, I think I'm going to have to make a highlight clip of this particular part of this live stream where I'm reading the fee article. Holy crap. Zachary Colley in the chat. But DarkCon, transparency is a very serious threat to our democracy. Run for the hills. Yeah. Mythical also asks, why are you so late on this? Because I'm a procrastinating motherfucker, Miffed. Sorry. But all the same, that's pretty much it as far as this episode of Strike Force goes. I wanted to get this episode of Strike Force out earlier, actually, because there's some other important things that I got to do. But nonetheless, yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. And as far as like using OBS for my streaming services, it seems that me using StreamYard to do my news streams is becoming less taxing on my computer to where it restarts, you know. But whenever I use OBS, my computer seems to want to just automatically and by itself restart on me right in the middle of a live stream. Like this is like what, the second or third time that it's done this? No, I think it's only the second time. Yeah. The first time was when that I was doing the coverage of 2020 election day, and the second time is today. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do something to figure out this problem. Outside of streaming, it's done it quite a few other times, but yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be doing any more live streams or news streams in particular. I mean, especially much less with OBS until I solve this problem that my computer is having with it. This little error code thing of it restarting on me. My computer, anyways. Attempt at humor failed on my end, says Zach Recalli. No, it's okay, Zach. Anyways, that's it for me. Thank you all for tuning in. Sorry that this episode of Strike Force couldn't be a little bit better. I'm sorry that I ended up losing the last live stream. Well, not quite losing it. Like, I still got 5 minutes of the live stream. I just have it privated. But nonetheless, see y'all later. Good night. Stay safe out there. And be doubtful. Be skeptical of claims. God bless and good night.